Amen.
Hey, you got it.
All by myself, I remembered. Because I
I'm
forgot.
really impressed.
I forgot
I
last.
had totally forgotten.
Yeah. Okay. I bought myself a new Bible,
Oh,
the NRSV that new one.
Updated edition.
Yeah, updated edition.
NRSV
UE.
did you pay $59.99?
I paid $10.
So it's not the Trump one.
It's not the Trump one, but the words are really low. I don't know. I have to get my magnifying glass out in order to see it.
What's the NRSV what?
UE, updated version.
NRSUV.
Yeah.
Yeah. He mentions that in this today, doesn't he? Chapter 9.
Uh-huh. Yep, that's
Yeah.
why I
There it is.
decided
Yeah.
I'd better buy
I
it.
read that one online.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, I could just look at it online. And then I thought, well, I haven't bought myself a new Bible in ages, so I'll get this one. But it's really hard to read. The difference is it's not that the print is so small, but the lines are so close together.
Oh, I couldn't do that.
Oh. Okay, so we are on John chapter 9, a really, really important part of John. And there's so much in this, so very, very much. So let's begin. And let us read. Let's just start through verse 12 and see. So what we can see about this chapter of John is that there are a few different sort of scenes. We have the actual receiving of sight, and then we have these kind of conversations that happen after that. So let's start with chapter 9, verse 1, and we'll read through verse 12 to begin. Okay? Anyone want to get started?
I'll start, and it's from the Message.
I have it here.
Okay, Jane Korsberg's got it from the Message. So we'll all follow closely on our own.
There you go. Walking down the street, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, causing him to be born blind?" Jesus said, "You're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. There is no such cause effect here. Look instead for what God can do. We need to be energetically at work for the one who sent me here, working while the sun shines. When night falls, the workday is over. For as long as I am in this world, there is plenty of light. I am the world's light." He said this and then spit in the dust, made a clay paste with the saliva, rubbed the paste on the blind man's eyes, and said, "Go wash at the pool of Siloam." Siloam means sent. The man went and washed and saw. Soon the town was buzzing. His relatives and those who year after year had seen him as a blind man begging were saying, Why isn't this the man we knew who sat here and begged?" Others said, "It's him all right." But others objected, "It's not the same man at all. It just looks like him." He said, "It's me, the very one." They said, "How did your eyes get opened?" "A man named Jesus made a paste and rubbed it on my eyes and told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' I did what he said. When I washed, I saw. So where is he? I don't know."
There's so much in that. So far, everything you know about John, what do you know? What do you know from in this? Important pieces.
Well, the two things. One is the identity.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the other is the action of the neighbors and what have you. But the other thing the big thing I think is in the beginning when they say, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents?
Yeah.
The question of illness and sin related in that culture.
Well, and in our culture too. I mean, it can be as simple as catching a cold and kind of trying to figure out who gave you the germs.
Anything else?
I have the Life Application Bible remarks. Innocent people sometimes suffer. If God took suffering away whenever we ask, we would follow him for comfort and convenience, not out of love and devotion. Regardless of the reasons for our suffering, Jesus has the power to help us deal with it. When you suffer from a disease, tragedy, or disability, try not to ask, why did this happen to me? Or what did I do wrong? Instead, ask God to give you strength for the trial and a clearer perspective on what is happening.
We're missing the big point.
Okay.
What's the big point? And
Recognizing Jesus.
yes, said part of it, the identifying of who Jesus is, but there's so much else going on here and we haven't hit it yet.
Well, I don't know what you're aiming at.
Oh, wait a minute. Where he says, I am the light of the
Oh
world.
my gosh, yes. Yes, I am the
Well,
light.
that was what I
he's
meant.
in the midst of the identifier, we have this huge light again. This healing happens in the light. And the man who's never been able to see ever. I mean, he keeps saying the man born blind. This man has never seen, ever, ever, ever seen. His eyes are opened and he now sees the light. I mean, that is absolutely huge.
Imagine how flabbergasted he was.
Exactly. And
Where he says, well, no, that's down later. I'm sorry.
and so how does that change or how does that inform this piece on whose fault is this? Because it's nobody's fault, remember, this is nobody's fault. I was quite taken by our authors. Now I took my marker out. I was quite taken by our author's alternative translation on page 86. Oh, there's Mike. Okay. On page 86, the paragraph that starts only, that's an iffy translation of the Greek. So she's talking about punctuation, etc. And so she's picking up this person, Meyer's translation, factors in the lack of punctuation in the original Greek without adding a phrase that manipulates the meaning. She translates it this way: neither this one sinned nor his parents, but so that the works of God might be revealed. That word revealed is the same sort of theme as we are getting with the man's eyes are opened, he has sight, and there is light, right? That's all of the same piece. So of God might be revealed to him, it is necessary for us to work the works of the one who sent me while it is light, while it is daytime. So
interestingly to me anyway, maybe it won't be to any of you, but my commentary has occasional special notes.
Uh-huh.
And the special note here is, in the fourth gospel, sin is not a moral category of behavior,
Mine
but
too.
is a theological category about one's response to the revelation of God in Jesus.
Exactly. That's what my commentator also says. And then what she adds to that very same thing is that it being sin is not a moral category, as you have said, but it is the result of not being in relationship with Jesus. So there we go again to these belief equals relationship equals light, sight, all of those things are of a piece. And when that whole piece is absent, that is what John considers sin. How does that change things for us? What kind of challenge?
Completely, because everything you do is considered as being a part of the relationship.
Yeah. So being in sin is being out of relationship. It's being out of balance. It's being out of kilter. So, we might think of it in ways, because none of us are blind, right? I had to be really careful preaching this in my congregation at St. Andrews, because I had a woman in the congregation born blind, and she prayed every day to see. It wasn't her sin. And I mean, I think at some point in time, somebody had convinced her that it had something to do. But eventually she was smart enough to not believe that stuff. But I still had to be very careful in preaching this. So what does that have to do then with all of us? Imagine turning our backs on that. I mean, I think for me, that's how I understand being out of relationship with God. When I turn my back, when I break the relationship, and I do that all the time. I get,
As do we all.
as do we all. I get impatient. I get, I mean, there's all sorts of things that we get. And then what follows from that, right, is dis-ease, because we've turned our backs. Whether that is physical dis-ease,
Dis-ease.
whether
Yes.
that's mental dis-ease, but that's what follows from broken relationships, from turning our back on God. So enough preaching for me. What do you think, Jane Korsberg?
Well, I've got a question about the quote from the translation. What do you think this is? Neither this one sinned nor his parents. Got that.
Mm-hmm.
But so that the works of God might be revealed to him, it is necessary for us to work the works. Who's the us? Is that disciples or is that Trinity?
I think that's a good question. I think it's ambiguous.
You're right.
But I wonder, because that's all I can ever do is wonder, if it isn't that similar thing that in relationship with God, we work the works, right? We walk the walk, we do the things, we love the way the stories teach us to love. We Yeah,
There's
so
my-
we work the works. And then, and we do that in this life. We do that while it is daytime.
Mhm.
That again, that image of walking in the light is so important. So if we don't do that, you know, all that other stuff results, and we are in sin.
I just realized, I was
Mhm.
thinking what you said, Reverend Kathy, and the thing that on Good Friday, it said that at noon or for the 3 hours, that everything turned dark,
Mhm.
which meant the works of light could not be done, that was
Wow.
the time where
Wow.
evil had its way. And then at death, when the temple thing was rent open,
Mm.
there have been light again.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah,
every so often my brain works.
yeah.
Interrupting a moment. Thank you, Jane, for your card.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. So this is a passage that it's not, you know, it's not just about healing this blind man.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a big, I mean, that is, yes, what it's about. But you know, we've read about Nicodemus coming to Jesus in the light. I mean, John just lays it on top, one on top of the next one, on top of the next one, helping us to see, helping us to move into the light. I'm going to read a little bit from my commentator because of course, I think she is so good. So this is a miracle of unprecedented proportions, she says, because this man was born blind. It's never seen before. And then she makes a general statement
What page?
about the signs. She says, as miraculous as they are, the signs are but the invitation to the possibilities of abundant life. In other words, the structure itself of sign, and so we're going to move on to the conversations, right? Because that's what follows, are these conversations about what just happened. And so she says, the structure itself of sign, dialogue, discourse underscores the primary theme of grace upon grace. The sign itself is grace, but what it signifies is grace upon grace. And that's what John's doing in this story, is just heaping grace upon grace. Look at it here. Oh my gosh. And then look at it here. Because what do we have that follows here? We have Jesus as the good shepherd. And that has everything to do with the man born blind. I mean, every single story builds upon this theme of abundance and grace upon grace and being in the light.
Did you read that again about the sign itself is grace?
What page is that?
That you don't have that one. That one I have. It's in this book right here. Okay, so in other words, let's see, as miraculous as they are, the signs are but the invitation to the possibilities of abundant life. In other words, the structure itself. So she's talking to us about the signs and then the dialogue and the discourse about the sign. So the structure itself of sign, dialogue, discourse underscores the primary theme of grace upon grace. The sign itself is grace, but what it signifies is grace upon grace. And then in the classroom, when she was teaching this, she would say, grace upon grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. It's amazing. This is the time we can use the word awesome. It is absolutely amazing and awesome grace that John is telling us about here. And it is revealed in the light. So this man had to see the light. And that, I think we need to then ask the question, what is the blindness? What is our dis-ease that we need to turn away from so that we can also be in the light and receive grace upon grace upon grace. So we can receive this abundance that John talks about in this gospel. And we know we're not talking prosperity gospel. We're not talking about more money.
But Jesus also so many times tells the leaders that if they didn't know the law, they would not be blind, but because they know what they should be doing, that blindness, because they are refusing the relationship, they, and they're going, well, we can see.
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that's a really good insight.
Yeah, it's like they are going
I have
blind.
a commentary.
Yeah. Yeah, Jane, of course, Jane Syme.
This is from Life Application. The Pharisees were shocked that Jesus thought they were spiritually blind. He countered by saying that it was only blindness, parenthesis, stubbornness and stupidity, that could excuse their behavior. To those who remained open and recognized how sin had truly blinded them from knowing the truth, he gave spiritual understanding and insight. But he rejected those who had become complacent, self-satisfied, and blind. The end.
Yeah. Yeah. So we take all of
I
that.
guess that's what
We take all of that into the next conversations then. One of the things I love, I mean, when we'll look at our author and how she stages this, you can imagine each one of these conversations happening. And I just eventually, I see the blind man just rolling his eyes.
He does at the end, and goes, don't you get it?
You have to tell you this again.
Right.
Just-
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine what a shock it was for him to be seeing?
Yeah. I mean,
He'd never seen light before.
it was a shock, but then they keep coming at him and saying, well, how did this happen? Who did this? And he keeps saying, well, it was this man called Jesus. That's all I know.
Yep.
I can see now. So there you go. I couldn't see. Now I can see. Jesus is his name. Why do you keep asking me?
And at the end, when he innocently says, well, do you want to follow him too? And then just get, whoa.
Yeah, I'm going to follow him because he did this. Okay, shall we read about the Pharisees?
Oh, yes. They are just
One thing I've gotten out of this study is how often Jesus says, do you, and I have to ask myself, do you want to live? Do you want to be in life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This is
You
how
have to really ask that question of yourself.
Yeah. And the answer to it is about being in relationship with Jesus. It isn't about following a list of do's and don'ts. It's about being in relationship with Jesus. And what does that look like? It looks like loving your neighbor. It looks like, I mean, it's in some moments,
Doing for your neighbor.
and some moments it seems so simple.
it's
And
not.
And then in other moments, it's like, oh my God, how are we going to do that? How are we going to solve all the problems of the world? Okay.
Those in our dearly beloved church congregation.
Yeah. 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 Okay.
Say that again, Ann.
I said, including in our dearly beloved church congregations.
Mhm. Yeah. That's where loving one's neighbor needs to be, and sometimes it's not. Okay, let us begin at 13. And how about if we split this one up a little bit? We'll go 13 through 34. So
I can read that.
let's see what we got.
The New International Version. They brought to the Pharisees the man who was blind. Now on the day which Jesus made the mud and opened the man's eyes was a Sabbath. It's always that, isn't it? Never during the week. Therefore, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others asked, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? So they were divided. Finally, they turned to the blind man. What have you to say about him? It was your eyes he opened. The man replied, he is a prophet. Notice there's no name, just the man. The Jews still did not believe he'd been blind and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. Is this your son? They asked. Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see? We know he's our son, the parents said, and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. For already the Jews had decided that anyone who acknowledged Jesus was the Christ would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, he's of age, ask him. A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Give glory to God, they said. We know this man is a sinner. He replied, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Then they asked him, well, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered, I told you already and you didn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. The man answered, now that's remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly man who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. To this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out.
Oh, isn't that something? Oh my gosh. I just think that I think it gets a bit silly.
Yeah.
The all, you know who this guy is. You've seen him around. Why are you asking me these questions? All I know is I can see now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here I am on page 88.
So that's the which one was that? The Pharisees?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of feel for the parents a little bit. They must have been so shocked and had bought into the thing that if you were born blind, somebody sinned.
Yeah, somebody obviously sinned.
They were perfectly happy to throw their son under the bus.
That
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because I don't know that we take seriously enough these words in verse 22. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, the Jewish authorities. We know that that should read the Jewish authorities. Does that read it that way in my new Bible? We know that
Call it Pharisees in here.
but we do know that his parents said this because they were afraid. Oh, this one says of the Jews, for the Jews had agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue.
Lack of community. Your
Lack of community. What happens with lack of community?
relationship.
Yeah, that's right. So that's a huge piece. I mean, that's another piece that John and John's gospel, that you so we always remember this is an intra-family struggle, right? These are all Jews. All of these people are Jews. This is an
This
intra-family
commentary said
conversation.
that
So
the Pharisees' skepticism was based not on insufficient evidence, but on jealousy of Jesus' his popularity and his influence on the people.
right. So
That's what they were jealous of.
if this is an intra-family struggle, these are all Jews. And it's been one way for quite some time. And here we have this upstart. Where did he come from? Who are his parents? Do we really know who this is? Healing people and saying things himself and being said about, I am the one who is come. It's me. And now this guy who can see again says it's him. And the woman at the well says it's him. Right? So the threat is, let's throw them out of the synagogue.
Like that was going to make such a difference.
Well, it would make a huge difference.
The fear and the power.
The fear and the power, right? Yeah. Yeah.
They use power. They use the fear to keep the power.
So these parents would not. So they say, he is of age. Ask him. We're not. I mean, they did throw him under the bus so that they would protect themselves. And that's that's an interesting way to parent a child.
It's kind of weird. You don't get the feeling that they were happy that he was received as at all.
They are afraid for their lives. What is life like outside of the synagogue? And that's what they were afraid of.
My commentary brings it into the time that it was written,
Okay.
that John wrote.
Okay.
Verse 22 makes clear that the man's parents are themselves Jews who worship in the synagogue. Jews must mean religious authorities. Scholars suggest that the phrase "put out of the synagogue" refers to events at the time the gospel was written and highlights the tension, perceived or real, between Johannine Christians and the religious authorities of their day.
Yes. Yeah. I think Johannine Christians is a bit of a misnomer used in that context. I mean, they still are, it's this intra-family thing. And now we do have, by the time John is written, we do have the sort of the forming of a new group. And that's what that commentator is called, the Johannine Christians.
Yeah.
The beloved
John's,
community. Yeah.
yeah. John's readers are able to see their own experience
Mhm.
in the story of the blind man.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So we remember that John is written way late. And so we do see the beginnings of a, sort of a breakout community. But they're still all of the same cloth.
So I'm thinking about Paul because I always think about Paul. And how much more difficult navigating this would have been early when he was doing it, even more difficult than when John was doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the questions were so much more immediate, maybe. I mean, do you get circumcised or not?
Yeah, and so much closer to what it meant to be Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
We have been through this, though, that as early as the time of Paul, he was, maybe it's too strong a word, but he was rejecting the law and the Jewish experience. And I'm not a scholar who's looked at this, but I have trouble thinking that by the year 100 that they're still in the same family. I mean, not the year 100. I mean, whatever it is, 100 years later that John is writing, if you follow Paul and then extend it that far, it's hard for me to imagine that they weren't. And the strength of the word that John uses over and over, the Jews, whether they're authority or not, boy, he casts them in a nasty light.
John does. Yeah.
John does.
Unfortunately.
So it's hard for me to.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to accept that that's just an intra-family thing. Sure sounds to me like they have an identity that's outside the Jewish world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it isn't as much as 100 years. I mean, Paul's writing in about 32-ish, 33. If we think Jesus died in about 33. And John is pushing 80.
Okay, but even that early, Paul is.
It's 50 years.
I mean, you remember what he.
Yeah.
How he treats the Jewish law.
Yeah. It's a good 50 years later. Go ahead, Sharon.
But, well, I agree with you, Mike, but I think that there's still a struggle with that.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
And that's what is most interesting and appealing to me about Paul is he so clearly sees how he's to follow Jesus, but his whole life up till that point had been wrapped up in being an observant Jew.
Yeah.
And how does he reconcile those two views of God?
Yeah.
And I could see that they're still struggling with that in John's time, because we still struggle with it now. You know, all those people who say, why do we have to read the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Messianic Jews who are a little strange to me, but
Yeah. So my commentator says members of families who choose to follow Jesus would be leaving their families for good. this would have been a complete break from
Mhm.
every communal structure that constituted society in the ancient world.
Not even the
And
my Lutheran pastor friends who were Jewish, and I have more than one too. One said that as far as his family's concerned, he's dead to them, and
Mm.
that's now.
Yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna say, Anne, and if you've never done it, you don't know what it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, I do think the closest thing we have these days is intra-family squabbles about politics and faith. And we might say, I'm not going to talk to you ever again. And it might feel really awful. But I still don't think that is of the intensity of this particular break. I just can't. I mean, I just don't think I have anything to imagine it. How complete that break would be.
And did your Lutheran pastor friend's family sit Shiva for him?
I think one did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, mine did not, but they
Yeah.
just sort of initially refused to recognize what was going on. But I know people whose families did.
Does everybody know what Sharon is saying? To sit Shiva? Yeah. Okay. It's like having a funeral for somebody.
Mhm.
They're dead to you. Imagine the grief of the heart.
On both sides.
Yes, in that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
it happens everywhere, all kinds of things, not just religion.
yeah. And I think that's what we take. I think that's what we need to take with us when we go into the Passion reading of John's Gospel tonight. That this is it's a tragic family struggle. And that it's just as we listen to those words of accusation that are in this Gospel of John, that we realize this is it was and it continues to be a huge struggle of separation and death, and in the midst of that sort of passion, we throw around words that maybe we didn't intend or don't mean for all time to be recorded in a book.
What do you mean by that? What kind of words or what part of it?
Well, I mean, in John's particular, when we read John's Passion on this particular day every single year, let's see, where do we start?
The sentencing starts John 19.
John 19 about Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, and the soldiers wove a corn. I mean, that it's
Maybe 17.
The beginning of the fake trial.
yeah, yeah.
Or 18.
Yeah, I think what we really get those those accusations a little bit later in the story about 18 and 19. The sort of where people can have chosen to read those and blame the Jews as a whole group of people for killing Jesus. That's what I mean when we listen to this story, this passion story, particularly in John. It's harsh.
19,
Yeah,
starting at verse 3.
yeah, most of 19. They kept
Yeah.
coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I'm bringing him to you." And then when we read, I mean, down here, when we get to the 10, Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?" And Jesus answered him, "You have no power over me unless it's been given to you." From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, and that's clearly empire talk, but it's not the way it's been read and reread.
And it has connotations for our time.
Yeah.
And all you have to do, well, I shouldn't say all you have to do, all I have to do, not even all one has to do, but all I have to do is think about the storming of the Capitol on January 6th, 2020. And that's, a crowd whipped up by their leaders.
Yeah,
And
willing to cause a riot. Yeah. And hold somebody responsible. Yeah.
so, we still do it today.
And the whole situation in the Middle East.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna head out in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
Likewise.
So maybe we should say what we're gonna do next time.
Oh, yeah. Well, so we're still back. I wouldn't mind moving on to the Good Shepherd, chapter 10.
That's fine with me.
Is that okay?
Okay, hang on, I need to write it down.
Can you give us pages, please?
So we'll move on to John chapter 10.
Well,
And pages in the book?
yeah, page 92.
Chapter 10. Yep, page 92 in the book. Again, pay attention.
92 to what?
94, I think, yeah.
92 through what?
94, she said.
94.
It's just
Thank you.
chapter 10 in your
And
book.
that's going to be when?
Next Friday.
Okay.
So pay attention. There's so much in that Good Shepherd story. So much.
On page 92, but okay.
And it's not just one thing or another thing. It's all the things at the same time. That John.
Okay. Blessed Easter to all. Pray for us musicians and hands and feet and everybody. And Kathy, I'll be thinking of you with your new role.
Yep, whatever it is. Haven't figured it out, but I am involved with the Teze music tonight, so that makes me
Good.
very happy. Yeah.
And I'm involved with a huge passion musical drama tonight, so,
I am looking forward to it.
oh, it's gonna be excellent.
So let us all listen to John's passion with new ears,
Mhm.
Yes.
eyes
indeed.
wide open.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Blessings, see you all.
bye-bye.
Happy Easter, everyone.
Happy Easter.
Happy Resurrection Day.
Yep.